Hi, everyone. Let's get started. My name is Alex Rookie. I'm a park ranger with the National Park Service here in Boston. If you're just joining us, welcome to Winter Wild, presented by Boston Harbor Islands National and State Park. If you're here from an earlier session, welcome back. A reminder that you can enable closed captioning by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Before we get started, we want to remind you that Birds of Prey will no longer be a live broadcast. Instead, it'll be a rerun of last year's talk from our first virtual festival, Winter Wonder. Unfortunately, this means that you won't be able to ask questions, but you'll still most definitely will be able to learn something. Now, for our last presentation of the day, Birds of Prey, you're able to find out why hawks, owls, eagles, osprey, and falcons are considered birds of prey and discover their amazing diversity while meeting 3 birds of prey native to Massachusetts. Former park ranger Lizzie Steers will be asking questions, and our time-traveling presenter is Kathleen A. Regan. Since 2007, Kathleen has been a teacher naturalist at Mass Audubon Blue Hills Trailside Museum. She holds a bachelor's in biology from SUNY Albany and a master's of science in ecological teaching and learning from Wellesley University. In addition to providing environmental education and guided outdoor programs for all age groups, Kathleen handles and presents live animal ambassadors as part of her school and public programs, including various mammals, reptiles, owls, and other birds of prey. A naturalist at heart and a Massachusetts resident, since 1992, she began outdoor exploration as a young child in upstate New York and has hiked and explored many areas around the world. Kathleen is the proud mother of 3 grown children and enjoys hiking, canoeing, kayaking, snowshoeing, and skiing. Mostly, she enjoys leading curious minds in outdoor experiential learning and exploration. And now, please enjoy Birds of Prey.
At Mass Audubon's Blue Hills Trailside Museum. Mass Audubon is the largest conservation organization in Massachusetts, and we have 21 nature centers around the state, about 60 or more, we keep adding, but wildlife sanctuaries. And each of the nature centers actually have something unique that they have to offer. And here at the Blue Hills Trailside Museum, we're right next to the Blue Hills Reservation. So the museum is about the natural history of the Blue Hills, but we also take care of a lot of wild animals here. We're not a zoo. We don't do any breeding here. The animals that are living with us are here because they can't be released to the wild. Something has happened to all of the animals that live here. So we are kind of caretakers. Now, what happened to them? Some of the animals were injured at one point in their life. They're fine now, but when animals are out living in nature, they need to be able to see really well and hear really well and fly really well if they're a bird, or run really fast in order to be able to find food and keep themselves safe. So if you have, for example, a bird of prey that can only see out of one eye because of an injury, if we let that animal go, it probably wouldn't survive. So we're going to keep these animals for the rest of their lives. We also have animals that are living with us that got separated from their families. They got orphaned when they were babies. A lot of times people will find them and bring them in, and very quickly these animals get imprinted, which means they lose their fear of humans. And once that happens, you really have to take care of them for the rest of their lives. We're very, very good at trying to return orphaned, especially birds of prey, to nature. And how we do that is that we have to find a nest of the same exact species of bird, and it has to be the same age chicks in the nest, and we have guys that will climb the trees and plop the baby birds in those nests, and the mother bird will just start taking care of it. We're very successful with that, but it's really tricky to be able to find, a nest and the same age chicks and the same species. So if we cannot do that, then we will keep the animals and take care of them for the rest of their lives. And then the last reason that we have some animal friends living with us is that some of them came to us because they were people's pets. People sometimes mean well. They'll find an orphaned animal and they'll bring it in, try to make it their pet, not realizing it's actually illegal to do so. But they learn very quickly that it's actually pretty hard to take care of a wild animal, and they will be surrendered, to a place like us. And then we're able to take care of those animals for the rest of their lives. We actually have 2 deer, 2 foxes, and a broadwing hawk here that were once people's pets. So just to give you an example. So today's presentation is about birds of prey in Massachusetts. We actually have 20 different species of bird of prey in Massachusetts, but I'm only going to really be introducing you to 3. And the 3 I chose are ones that you can particularly see now in the wintertime. And at the end of the presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about snowy owls too. We have a snowy owl here at the museum, but it's not trained to get on my hand. So I can't introduce you that way, but I do have some artifacts that I can, or biofacts that I can show you that belong to snowy owls. And then I can talk a little bit about the research project that goes on from this museum on snowy owls. My question is, like, what is a bird of prey? Well, it's a bird to begin with, and a bird is an animal that has this. This is what makes birds unique from all other species of animals on planet Earth. If you are a bird, you have feathers. All right, but a bird of prey, they're kind of, distinctive birds. And what makes them a bird of prey is the way that they hunt. And what they hunt with is these. So what I have, what I'm showing you right here, this is a foot of a great horned owl. And this one is a foot of a red-tailed hawk. And these are their tools for capturing their prey, their feet. There are birds that will use their beak to capture their prey, but birds of prey, and these are our eagles, our ospreys, our hawks, our falcons, our owls, they all use their feet, and they have very special toenails like this. And same material as our fingernails, but they're a special claw called a talon. And these are what they're using to grab onto their prey. They're going to use their beak, kind of like a fork and knife, to tear apart their prey, but their prey is captured by their feet. Now, the one cool thing though, is I wanted to show you the difference here. This is a foot, again, of a great horned owl, and this one is of a red-tailed hawk. And if you look at them, you actually can see a difference in the formation of their feet, their toes. So the hawk has 3 toes in the front and 1 in the back, but the owl has 2 toes on top and 2 on the bottom. And that configuration is called zygodactyl, means paired toes. And that allows the owl to kind of grasp its prey just like this. Now, the cool thing though, what's really kind of unique about owls too, is that they have a toe that's like our thumb, and they can move this around. Now, these are animals that are primarily hunting at night. Not all owls are nocturnal, but a great many of them are. So having these tools, this flexible toe to be able to hunt and grab when you're trying to hunt for prey during the nighttime in the dark, having that flexible foot is very, very handy. The only other bird on planet Earth that has a toe like this is another raptor called the osprey. And the osprey needs them because when the osprey is going down to grab fish, they have to be able to kind of turn the fish around and get it aerodynamic so they can take off right out of the water. And having that flexible toe helps them to do that as well. All right, so I'm going to show you their beak, and their beaks are used, of course. This is a great horned owl, and this is again, a red-tailed hawk. And the beak, you can see, is curved, and that's going to be very useful in tearing apart their food. Now, owls often will swallow their food whole, but with a great horned owl, this is a very large bird. You're going to actually be meeting one shortly. They they have larger animals for prey, so they have to be able to take their food and rip it apart, and so do the other birds of prey. Now, but I want you to notice a difference here, because you can see the skull, but if you look at the eyes, you can really notice a difference between the great horned owl and the red-tailed hawk. So here you have a diurnal bird of prey, and here you have a nocturnal bird of prey. So if you look at the diurnal bird of prey, all birds of prey have this very special structure around their eyes. That's because their eyes have to be large. The diurnal birds of prey are really using their eyesight to be able to look for and capture their prey. That's why you see them soaring. They have excellent vision. They can see long distances, but because their eyes are larger, they have to have a special bone wrapped around their eyes to help hold up those big giant eyes. And that bone has a special name. It's called a sclerotic ring. And you can see that in the owl, the sclerotic ring is much, much, much larger. And that's because the owls have larger eyes than the diurnal birds of prey. But these are still pretty big. And because they have this bone wrapped around their eye, it actually prevents them from being able to move their eye very much. The diurnal birds of prey have a little bit more ability to move their eyes, just a little, but owls cannot move their eyes at all. They are really locked in place. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The other thing I want you to notice is this bony structure that is over a hawk's eye. And what that is it's actually forming almost like if I put on a baseball cap, it forms a brim. And that brim is allowing the owl or the bird of prey to be able to see when it's really sunny outside. It's almost like having something to protect your eyes. And that's what that bony structure is right there. And now I want to show you the owl. Now these are really enormous. These are very large sclerotic rings, and because of that, and they can't move their eyes. And if an owl, just to give you a sense of how big their eyes are, if an owl were as tall as me, my eyes would be the size of my fist, and they would weigh 5 pounds a piece. So I'd have 10 pounds of eyeballs if I were an owl. So that just gives you an idea of how big their eyes are compared to their body size. All right, you can see that right there. All right, so I think what I'll do, I've got a lot of other things I'm going to be talking to you about birds of prey, but I think I'd like to do that while I have an animal in my hand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my camera and I'm going to show you me getting the bird of prey out of its carrying case. All right, so I'm just going to turn it like this. And I'm going to start with a small bird of prey. I'm going to kind of work my way up to the largest bird of prey that I have here. All right, now this is not where these guys live. This is just how we safely carry them around. They actually have very large enclosures where they can fly around, but this is just to keep them safe when we're moving from one place to the other. Now they have the animals that are in captivity. These birds of prey have little straps around their feet called jesses. They're leather straps, and that is attached to a leash. And I'm going to attach that leash to me, and that will prevent the bird from flying around the room. And then of course I have to protect my hand from their talons because they're going to be using those to hold on. That's how they hold on when they're sitting in a tree branch. That's how they're going to hold on to me. Oh, where did you? You're coming right out to say hello. You're coming right out to say hello. All right, let me get around here. All right, my first little friend here has quite a story too. Okay, there we go. So this is an eastern screech owl. And this is a very common animal. They are all over the place. They're a very, very common owl in Massachusetts, even though you don't see them that much because, you know, they're coming out at night. And this guy doesn't hoot a lot. And the reason they don't hoot a lot is because they're little. This is a full-grown eastern screech owl. So they end up being prey items for other owls and other animals. So they have to be kind of quiet. They only hoot when they have to, when they're trying to communicate with one another or during mating season. Now, what's really neat about these guys is they come in all different colors. Most owls don't do that. They may have a little variation between the male and female, but these guys actually come in different colors. So I'm just going to show you a picture real quick here. You can see that this one is called an intermediate because that has a lot of different colors, but we have ones that come that have red feathers and ones that have gray, and kind of a mixture of both. And you can have those differences within a family unit. It's like having different colored hair. So this one just happens to be an intermediate, and I want you to have a really close look. She's very curious right now. You can see her large eyes. You can also see that around her face, well, you see something. Around her face, she has like a, where are you going? Where are you going? She's got like a dark circle around her face. And what that dark circle is, it's actually very stiff feathers that are radiating out all around her eyes, all around her face. And that's called her facial ruff. And then around her eyes, she's got two bowls of feathers. The feathers are actually shaped like bowls. And those are her sound collectors. Like our sound collectors are right here. Oh, I know you just want to fly around. Our sound collectors are here, but hers are actually wrapped around her eyes. It would be like us taking our external ear part and just putting them around our eyes. That's why owls always look at you so intently, because they're listening and looking at you at the same exact time. This is how they're gathering sound. And then they're going to take that sound and put it into their eardrums. But their eardrums aren't on the same side of their head like ours are. They have one up here and one down here. It's called asymmetrical hearing. So they have one kind of facing up this way and one facing down this way. Not all owls have that, but most of the owls in the Northern Hemisphere do. And that helps them to hear better. They can hear in a horizontal plane, a vertical plane, all around them. And they have to be able to hear, during the winter time, especially the ones in the north, when they are listening for their prey underneath the snow, in the forest, in the dark. I always like to say that owls are super good listeners, because the primary sense that they use to be able to hear or to be able to find their food is their hearing. So much of their body structure is designed to help them hear better. So one is the crazy configuration of the eardrums. The other one is these facial discs, these things that are the bowls of feathers that are wrapped around the eyes. And then the other thing that they have, and this is really interesting because only owls have this adaptation. They have silent flight. And this is actually a wing of a great horned owl. So you can see this is a lot bigger than this little guy. And when you flap their wings, they make no noise. Now, the reason that is because they have really, really, really soft feathers, really soft feathers. And all that softness helps to absorb sound. But it's a trade-off. These owls have this silent flight, but in order to have these really fluffy feathers that fly silently, they aren't waterproofing themselves. They don't have oils that will help them to waterproof themselves to keep them warm. So they have to have a lot of feathers to keep them warm. And they don't hunt in the rain because they would just get drenched. They wouldn't be able to fly. So owls tend to hunker down when it's really raining very hard. Now, why do they fly silently? Well, owls are super good listeners. And if you can hear birds flying by, most birds, when they're flapping their wings, their feathers are very stiff, and that moves air around, and that's going to make wind, and the wind makes noise. But these guys, because of all that softness, they can fly silently, and that's going to enable them to listen, to hear their prey under the leaves, under the snow, in the forest, in the dark. The other structure that they have, and I'm gonna try to show you this up close, but then I'm going to also show you a photograph of it. But if you can look at the top of this feather, I want to see if you can actually see this. It almost looks like there's eyelashes going all the way along the top of the flight feather. And up close, it looks like this. All right. And these are called flutings or fimbri. And these flutings, as the owl's kind of gliding through or even flapping its wing, those eyelash structures are, kind of like eyelash structures, are going to completely just slice through the air, reduce the turbulence, and that is also going to reduce the sound. So it's very, very important that these owls fly silently. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you, which is really neat, because I'm telling you, these are all around us. They are all around us. And they really like parks. If you've ever seen a robin in your backyard or in a park near you, you probably have screech owls too, because they like to eat the same kind of food. It's all about being able to find food. And one of their favorite foods is earthworms. And during the summertime, when we turn our lights on outside, these guys just love moths. So when moths are attracted to our lights outside our house, it's almost like fast food restaurant. They can just fly right by and grab a couple of moths and be on their way. So they're all around us, and even in the urban centers. I've had friends send me photographs of owls sleeping during the day, and I'm going to show you what that might look like. So this is just a section of a tree. And this is a hole in a tree that was made by a woodpecker. Owls can't make holes like this, but when a woodpecker makes a hole like this, it's so that they can get inside, lay their eggs, and raise their family. But then when they move out, this hole stays. And there are holes in trees. I'm always looking at holes in trees when I'm walking around, even in Boston. And if you do, you might one day see a little face sticking out, a sleeping owl. So just always look at holes in trees to see if you see anybody peeking out. But what's really neat about this, you can see the color of the bark, and then you can see the color of her feathers. So if I kind of turn her sideways, like this, she almost disappears. And that's because the colors in her feathers are helping her to camouflage when she's sitting in a tree. So they're really tricky to see, especially when they're, mostly awake at night. That's why I'm always looking for these tree holes to see if their little face is sticking out. Now she's got these little things on top of her head right here. And these are called ear tufts, and they stick up, but they're not ears at all. They actually have nothing to do with their hearing. They're just feathers, and they kind of use them to help them camouflage. So if she is sitting on a tree branch and she feels danger, she can make her body really skinny and stick those ear tufts up in the air, and she'll start to look like part of the tree. So a lot of the woodland owls that we see in Massachusetts, if their primary habitat is or around forests and near fields, they might have these ear tufts on top of their head to help them to camouflage when they're sitting in a tree. All right, so I think I probably should take a break here and take some questions. Been throwing a lot. So could you monitor the questions for me so I can keep an eye on my friend here?
Absolutely, absolutely. So one of our questions is, are there other asymmetric ear placements in owls outside of the Northern Hemisphere?
There are. So in North America, it's probably about 2/3 of the owls have the asymmetric ear placement. In the Southern Hemisphere, it's about a half, 50-50. Yep.
Okay, wonderful. So our next one is the Eastern Screech Owl nocturnal?
This is a nocturnal owl. The owls that we have in Massachusetts, we have 7 resident species. That is the barred owl, the barn owl, the great horned owl, the long-eared owl, short-eared owl, the northern saw-whet, the eastern screech owl. I think that's, I got all of them. And then our visitor is the snowy owl. And the snowy owl is, because it's a migratory bird, that one tends to be kind of more diurnal, and it's a lot easier to see the snowy owl during the day. And I'll talk about that a little bit at the end of the presentation. But this is definitely a nocturnal owl.
Wonderful. And how long do these Eastern Screech Owls usually live in captivity versus the wild?
Well, that's a great question. Our animals actually usually live a lot longer in captivity because they're so well fed and they're protected. They don't have any predators, and we have a team of veterinarians looking after them. This particular species, they usually lay maybe like 4 to 6 eggs, but there's about a 70% mortality rate with predation within their first year. But if they're going to survive, if they do survive, they usually live to be about maybe 10 years old. And then if they're in captivity, they can live into their 20s. Now, what happened with her story, similar to a tree hole, actually someone cut down a tree 2 years ago in the springtime and didn't look to see if anybody was home. And inside that tree were 2 parents, screech owls. The parents were killed and 2 of the eggs got smashed, but 2 of the eggs survived. So the person who cut down the tree brought the eggs to the museum and we hatched them. And so she is staying with us, and her sister is over at the Franklin Zoo. That's
fantastic.
Yeah.
And so what is her name?
So that also is a very good question. So we actually, I know a lot of like zoos and stuff do name their animals. We don't here, and the reason is because we're caretakers of these animals. One of the lessons that we're trying to teach, that it's not a good idea to go out and get a wild animal and bring it home and make it your pet. And because that's a big part of our message during education, we have decided that we're not going to name our pets, and name our birds. We're just going to, or any of our animals actually, just call them by what they are. So this is our female intermediate screech owl.
That sounds like a really good policy. So what is the most distinguishing feature of the male versus the female screech owls?
So what's really interesting, if you have them side by side, and this actually goes with all birds of prey, the female is generally 20% larger. And the reason for that is birds of prey are actually very large birds. They take a long time to hatch. They take a long time to, learn how to fly. And then they take a really long time to learn how to be the hunter that they are. So they are staying with mom and dad for a really, really, really long time, like all the way through the summer. And you okay? Right. I actually lost my train of thought there for a second because my big friend over here is scratching. What was it? What was the question again? My big friend wants to come out and visit really bad. The initial question. I apologize.
Totally fine. You have literally a lot in your hands. What is the main difference between male and female?
Oh yeah. So the females are larger, and the reason for that is they've got to be able to. They sit on the nest. The job of the female is to sit on the nest and to raise the young. When you meet the great horned owl, they are actually, and that's why she's so feisty right now, they actually lay their eggs in February. It's very cold, in February. So they have to be able to keep themselves warm and the chicks warm. And then the male, being 20% lighter makes him a more agile hunter, and his role is to go out and hunt and bring the food back to the family, the growing family. Once they are out of the nest, then the female returns to go hunt herself. But they're usually 20% larger.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So one of our next questions is, how do owls turn their heads so far?
Oh, really great question. And they have to do that to be able to see. So they can turn their head 270 degrees. So that would be like me looking that way, and then turning my head that way. So 270 degrees one way and 270 degrees the other way. And how they do that is they have more vertebra, more bones in their neck than we do. We have 7 vertebra in our neck, and our necks are pretty flexible, but they have 14. And that allows their head to be able to really turn all around them. And they have to do that because they can only look straight ahead. They can't move their eyes. So they have to be able to move their head to look around. Yep. Let me check the time, make sure we get all our birds of prey. And so I want to take a few more questions on this one, and then I'll bring up my next.
Sure. So we have another one about the ear placements. So are all asymmetric ear placements in owls usually like the top right and bottom left?
Yeah, I actually have a picture here. And this is the classic configuration, or the one on the right is higher and the one on the left is lower. Yep.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
And if we have time for one more, are owls endangered?
So these guys are not. I'm going to talk a lot about endangered species when I bring out my last one, but these guys have adapted very, very well, this particular species, to living around humans. Again, because I was saying the lights, and they love the earthworms that are in our lawns. They love the moths that are around our houses. And then in the wintertime, they're primarily eating small mice, and wherever there's humans, there's mice, and rats. And so there's plenty of food for them. The other thing is that living amongst homes and in trees and houses, it kind of gives them also some camouflage or protection against the great horned owls that prey on them, because the great horned owls need a lot more room. They need about 2 square miles of territory. They need to consume a lot more food. So they need a lot more open space and a lot more wildlife around them to be able to survive. So living in urban communities is actually a good place for these guys to be. Less predators.
Well, that's very lucky. So one more quick one. Are the ear tufts called ear tufts because they look like cat ears?
Yes, they got that name because they look like ears, but they're not. They're just feathers. Okay, I'm going to put her away.
That's good.
And then I'm going to bring out my other friend. Now these guys are bigger and feistier, so a lot of fun going to happen right now. They are really, really anxious to get out. Hello. Here you go. All right. All right, sweetie. Good girl. All right, so I'm going to bring my next friend here. I've got the, nope, that's my other friend. They're coming out soon. This is my next friend. Sorry, I'm off camera. Here we go. Much bigger box. And a much bigger glove. Okay, this is the Peregrine Falcon. And I'm going to tell you her story. All right, you ready? Hello. Oh, yes. Hello, my dear. Hello, my dear. Yes. Can I flap your wings? All right. Okay. So this is a Peregrine Falcon. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about her behavior. I'm going to see if she's going to be doing it a little. She's shaking right now. I don't know if you can actually see that. But usually when I greet her, when she comes to me in the, like in the morning when I'm first seeing her, she'll put her wings out and she'll start shaking them like this. And a lot of times when I bring her on to programs, they'll say, oh, she's scared. Is she nervous? No, that's just her way of actually saying, I am the boss. She likes to make herself big, and she greets, she's a female. She would greet a male that way. She'd put her wings out and just shake like this. And that's just a behavior to say, I'm big, I'm bigger than you are, and I am the boss of this nest. She is a beautiful, beautiful bird of prey. This is the fastest animal on planet Earth. They are a bird that hunts other birds. And so when they are hunting, they go into a shape that almost looks like a bullet. They really are aerodynamic. I can show you a picture of that dive right there. And that's called a stooping dive. And they have been clocked up to 242 miles an hour in those dives. So when you are hunting other birds, you've got to be fast. You've got to be really, really fast. So she's got some adaptations that are very unique and kind of different from the other birds of prey. So one of that is that she can really tuck her wings in. I have another falcon wing here. This is actually a Merlin wing, but this gives you the idea of the shape. It's more angular, and that's going to allow them to tuck their wings in so that they become very, very aerodynamic, so they can dive and go after other birds. The other thing that she has that makes her kind of a really fierce hunter, and she's got to be able to have this adaptation because she's got to kill her prey very quickly. She is seizing them with her feet. You might not be able to see, so I was hoping you'd open your mouth so people could see your beak. So on her beak, she's got a structure that actually comes down. It's called a Toemill Tooth. And then it's got a notch on the other side that they fit in perfectly together. I'm going to see if I can get her to open her mouth so that you can see that. Ooh, see? If you can see that structure. Oh, yes, I know. Yes. Oh, it's so good to see you. So that Toemill Tooth, what that is designed to do is when she is coming into a dive, she actually will hit the bird full force with her feet. That will kind of knock the bird senseless, and it starts to fall. And then she'll come back around underneath it, grab it. And then with her Toemill Tooth, she'll bite the neck, and it dislocates the spine like that. So it kills the bird instantly. She has to be able to do that because they're both flying, and she wants to kind of disable this prey item immediately. So she'll do that. The other thing that they have that's kind of neat is you can see the darkness that's around her face and kind of comes down the sides. We call that their mustache. And that is unique to, I mean, it's different for each bird. Like us having our fingertips can, our fingerprints can, are all different. That mustache is all different on every bird. So we can actually identify them that way. So she's got that, but that darkness, what that helps her to do, if you've ever seen football players putting dark smudges underneath their eyes when they're playing football, that's to help with glare. Well, this is the same thing that's going on with her. That helps with her glare when she's hunting in the sun. The other thing that she's had, and I'm not going to probably be able to see this, but in her nostrils, right there. She's got this little pointy bone that kind of sticks out. And the designers of jet engines actually got their idea from this bird, because what that thing, it's called a tubercle, and what it's doing is when she's in a dive, if she didn't have this bony structure, it's almost like a cone that sticks out of each one of her nostrils. It spreads the air out. She'd have so much air pressure going down, it would blow out her lungs. So this disperses the air pressure. And the same thing on a jet engine, they have those cone type structures that come out of the middle of the engine. That is to disperse air so that the engine doesn't conk out. You don't want to have too much air pressure, too much airflow. Let me see what else you got that's really cool. You're so beautiful. Yes, you are. So if you look at her wings, you can see that this wing is a little, there's a little, if I turn it this way, let me see if I can show you. She's got, this is a feather that would be on the equivalent of our thumb. And this is the feather that they actually use to brake. So when a bird is trying to slow down, they actually stick that thing up, almost like when you see an airplane sticking their flaps up. It's just to, you know, put a brake on the wind to slow them down. And she needs that to be able to slow herself down after she's, you know, going into a full on dive at 243 miles an hour. What happened to her was when she was a baby, she was learning how to fly, and she accidentally flew into a building, and she completely shattered all of the bones in her wing, and she was just found on the ground outside this building in Rhode Island, and it was a skyscraper. So what they did was they brought her, wildlife rehabilitator took care of her and you know, got her well, and now she comes to live with us. But she can't tuck that wing back in, and she can't undo her brake. That's kind of permanently out. So she would not be able to survive if we let her go. Even though she learned how to hunt, she doesn't have the capability to hunt the way she needs to. She wouldn't be able to get the speeds, and she wouldn't be able to slow herself down. So we're going to keep her for the rest of her life. Now, one of the cool things before I start taking questions is that we actually, Mass Audubon has a live cam on a nest that is in the Customs House in Boston. This was a bird that almost went extinct. It was was impacted by DDT in the 60s. And we actually had no peregrine falcons in the eastern part of the United States for a good number of years. It wasn't until in the 70s, 1972, when they banned DDT, realized that that was, it was a pesticide, and the birds that ate the birds that ate the insects that were impacted by the pesticides got that into their bodies. And then she would hunt birds, and she would get the pesticide into her body. It just kind of concentrated its way up the food chain. And what it did was it made their eggs brittle. So when they laid their eggs and sat them, they would just crack. So they banned DDT. There was a lot of active breeding programs to try to get them reestablished, and it was successful. And there's now 30 breeding pairs in Massachusetts. There's a lot of them in Boston, and they were taken off the endangered species list in 2017. So big yay for that. That's such a good story, isn't it? So yeah, so you can actually see the live cam. You know, watch out for the spring when the female that lays her egg, it's the same nesting pair that keeps coming back. And she's laid 168 or raised 168 chicks since 2005. And they think that she is responsible for populating most of the Atlantic seaboard with the peregrine falcons. Pretty cool story. Okay, so I'd love to take some questions.
That is a fabulous story. So what do you feed her?
So we have rats and things that we actually raise here, and we sometimes will give her rats, but we also give her some birds. The name of the bird, it's an invasive species. I'll think of it in a minute, but we actually buy from suppliers the rest of the food for the animals, especially certain ones that have to have, you know, like her, she needs to have birds in her diet. So, you know, we have to buy those from a supplier. Yep.
And so another question is, are the stripes on her abdomen and the inside of her wings, are they for camouflage?
Yeah, so these are, I'm going to turn you around so you can see the grays on her. So when they are living in nature, these are birds that like to live in cliffs. So they will nest in craggy areas. So their feathers, when they're, all tucked in like that, that is designed to help them to camouflage when they're sitting, on a cliff edge. But then when they're flying, you want to have a little bit of a lighter color, because if a prey item is looking up at the sky, you want to have lighter feathers here to help her camouflage against that sky. Now, the success story of this bird is interesting because they are doing really well in Boston. And that's because these birds they have to get really high in order to get into those dives. So they typically nest in cliffs and hunt from cliffs. The skyscrapers in Boston, they don't know the difference between that and a cliff. So they're actually cliffs. So they nest in all these, and the tops of these skyscrapers all over Boston, and they hunt the seagulls and they hunt the pigeons. So they have done very, very well in adapting to living in an urban environment. So that's really, so if you're in Boston, look up and see if you see these guys, because the ones that live here in Massachusetts, they stay here all year long. The peregrine falcons that live more up in the Arctic area, they tend to do much larger migrations, but there's enough food in our urban centers for these guys to be able to stay here all year long. And that's, again, that's the key about whether you need to migrate or not, is the ability to find food. And since they have plenty of food sources here, they don't need to migrate. It's not about staying warm, it's about finding food. Yep.
Well, I'm glad they're able to find enough food.
Yes.
So one of our next questions is, has there been any success in banning rat poison as it's so harmful to raptors?
In banning rat poison, there is such a big movement to try to do that. And we had a speaker here, as a matter of fact, who was talking about that. And they're trying really hard, but it's hard because a lot of people, the restaurants and things in Boston, we're trying to educate them that there's other ways to trap a rat or kill a rat besides poison. But that's a very huge educational thing. We haven't had luck with getting that banned or anything like that. The rat poison's banned, not yet.
Is there anything that
problem? That is a big problem.
Yeah.
Birds of prey.
Is there anything that our viewers can do at home to make sure that they are not contributing to or negatively to their local bird species?
It's, when one of the lessons I always tell people is, especially during the springtime, don't cut down any trees. Because not for this particular species, but a lot of the other species will get inside tree holes, and not just birds, but other species of animals. So it's very important in the springtime when animals are having babies and and during the early summer when they're raising them, not to cut down a tree, or at least check to see inside your trees to see if there's anybody home living in there before you cut it down. The other thing too is just to make sure that you have trees. If you can plant a tree, I mean, all these animals really love, to be able to live in trees, and the food that they eat comes from trees and lives in trees, and so that's a really good thing. And then in the city areas, I think it's really just being aware and supporting them. There's a lot of organizations that work very hard. The Peregrine Fund, Mass Audubon, to study and protect these birds. So often, if you want to, donate to them, you can read about them online and see all the good works that they're doing. They're always in need of funding to help them continue the research. So that's a good thing to do too. And then just for the owls, you can actually put up owl houses in your yard to give them a habitat. And that's a really fun thing to do. It takes a few years before an owl notices an owl house. So you have to be very patient, but that's another thing that you can do. And then also just, just pay attention to things like, when we banned DDT, that took a big effort to be able to do that, and took a lot of public support to be able to do that. So pay attention to things like that too. Okay,
Wonderful.
so I want to make sure that we got 15 more. I'll take a few more questions and then I'll.
Okay.
Yep.
Sounds good. So you mentioned earlier that one breeding pair is responsible for most of the peregrine falcons on the eastern seaboard. Do they not need a high level of genetic diversity, or has that impacted the population at all?
So the ones that have let loose, there's also people that are doing the same thing with other populations. you know, that are more south and stuff. And these are breeding with each other. So it's like, when you're thinking about that, you know, she may have had 4 eggs. One of them survived, and that mated with that bird that she created. Mated with a species that, or mated with a bird that was down in North Carolina, say. That is adding to that gene pool. If you know what I mean. So it's like one side, one pair, like the female's eggs is one side of it, and then the male's the other. So, and I would imagine there's some interbreeding too, but there's enough of these programs going on along the Eastern Seaboard to be able to add to that number, if I'm making any sense.
Oh, entirely. Yeah, thank you. That was a great answer. So how old will she likely live in captivity? And then how does that compare to her wild relatives?
Okay, so if she were in the wild, she would probably live to be between 15 and 20 years old. Again, first year mortality is about 50%. It's just, you know, they're learning how to fly. They might get preyed on, things like that. But if they survive into adulthood, they can go 15 to 20. So if she with us, she'll go well into her 20s. Yep.
That's fantastic. And so why do you have different gloves to hold the different birds?
That's a really good question. So we don't want to cross-contaminate in case one of, you know, they're different species and our gloves get pooped on and things like that. But we don't want to have any kind of germ that she might have going to another bird. So it's to help us to keep them, you know, safe and not cross-contaminate. All right, so I'm going to put her back, and then I'm going to get my big girl. So I'm just going to warn you up front. My great horned owl is particularly feisty these last couple of weeks because this is their breeding season. And I know what she's saying. She's saying, I know I'm supposed to be doing something, but I don't know what it is. And she's just full of beans right now. So she's going to be making a lot of noise and moving around, and don't worry about it. That's just her. So I'm going to put this one back. I'm going to turn the camera around so you can see me getting her, my big gal out of her box. All right, sweetheart. Now you're doing the shaking thing. That's what I want everybody to see. I know you're the boss. I know you're the boss. You are absolutely the boss. All right, big girl, your turn. You're up. Let's see how she's gonna be. She was pretty feisty earlier. Oh yeah, you're feisty still. You're feisty still. You gonna come out? Huh? Feisty girl. Don't worry, folks. It's perfectly normal. Oh, I know. I just so mad. So mad. All right, you. You go. Hold on a minute. She's being feisty. There you go. My big girl. Whew. So this is it's okay. It's all right. This is a female great horned owl. All girls here today. And she is a big girl. Yes, show them your beautiful wings. Show them how big you are. So she's got a good like 4.5 foot wingspan. She's a big female. And I love looking at her face because this is really just so a classic owl that you can see the facial ruff and the discs that are collecting the sound. Now, she kind of looks like she's mad all the time. She looks like she's like this. But really what that is, and I think they're a little mad right now, but what that is this is an owl that's too big to get inside a tree hole. You're just way too big. So she's outside all the time. And that brim, again, it's kind of like a brim. It's going to prevent like snow and rain and everything getting into her eyes because she's outside all the time. Now these guys, like I said, they're laying their eggs right now. These I have seen females laying on their nest covered with snow, covered with ice, these wonderful animals. And they don't build their own nests. Most owls take over the nests of other animals, and it really kind of makes sense when you think about it in the winter. She doesn't have to waste time or energy building a nest because all the birds that have migrated and flown away have left all these empty nests around. So the great blue herons and some of the hawks, or if it's a crow's nest, she can take over those nests and have her lay her eggs there. Yes. Now this is the one that has the classic hoot that you hear in all the movies. And these birds are all around us too. I mostly hear these guys. I have heard them in the parks in Boston, but they're in the suburbs. They're all through the Blue Hills. But we have a lot of great horned owls. It's a very healthy population of these as well. This is an apex predator. I heard the tracking of folks talking about that these guys eat skunks. That's one of her favorite foods because the birds don't have a very good sense of smell. So this is one of the predators of skunks. She's got very big ear tufts because she is a woodland owl. Yes, and you can see how big her tails are. She actually has a very strong grip. They say it's 500 pounds per square inch, and she's actually bruised me a few times. She doesn't mean to, she's just holding on tight. But I get the sense of like how, how much she can really squeeze her feet to hold on to prey. Yes, I see you. I bet you a lot of you have heard this owl around you because they hoot a lot more than the other owls. You gonna stand up straight? You gonna stand up straight and say hi to everybody? You gonna relax? See what I see? She's like, I know I'm supposed to be doing something. I just don't know what it is. All right, so I would love to just start taking questions and then I can talk more about like her and her anatomy. I would just do it right with the questions.
Sounds great. So one of our questions is, do these different birds share enclosures?
No, for one thing, they would like, because she's such a strong predator, she would eat them. But the other thing, we do have birds of the same species, but we don't put them with each other. And I know that sounds kind of sad, but we don't want them to breed because if they did breed, we'd have to keep those birds too. We are taking care of animals that they have no choice, that we can't release them to the wild, but we don't want to breed ones that we have to keep because these animals wouldn't have the ability to teach their young how to be a wild animal. So we've just decided we're not going to breed them. They do breeding like in zoos and stuff to help preserve species, especially if they're endangered. But we're just caretakers for birds that can't be released. So we don't breed them.
So do the male and females have different hooting patterns or different hooting pitches?
Yeah, so I've actually got a male and a female. I'm gonna actually go out this weekend to see if I can try to find the nest because like I said, they're laying their eggs right now. But I have a male and a female and I can always tell who's hooting because the female's hoot is higher and the male's hoot is lower. So like, woo, 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 and it's woo, 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 woo. So it's very easy to tell the difference between the male and the female. What she's doing right now, you can see she's moving her throat in and out. She's panting. And just like a dog, they can't sweat, so they have to regulate their body temperature by panting, and she's doing the same thing. Yep.
So a bunch of our different virtual visitors want to know what her story is.
So she's 10 years old, and she was found when she was a baby. She was orphaned and found along the side of a highway. A couple of things could have happened. She could have been picked up by a predator when she was and dropped, or she could have just been blown out of a nest in a storm. But she was found, and the owner meant well. Instead of surrendering it immediately, they took it into their home and started to feed it and thought maybe they could keep it as a pet. And that didn't work out so well. And so they realized it wasn't a good idea. And then they finally surrendered. But by that time, she had already gotten so imprinted on humans and she had no skills. We couldn't put her in a nest with other birds. She was actually too old at that point, but she was also very used to humans. And one of the reasons behind that is that birds who get used to humans feeding them, if you let them go, they'll actually go in search of a human. So you can imagine if you saw an owl, you know, coming toward you, because it was looking for some food, it was thought you were going to give it. It wouldn't be safe for the owl, certainly wouldn't be safe for us, wouldn't be safe for the owl. So we have to keep them for the rest of their lives.
That makes sense. So what should our visitors do if they do find an injured animal of any age?
So one good thing about Massachusetts is we have what's called animal rescue leagues, and all you have to do is like look up the animal rescue league in your area, and they will come and get the animal. It's really not, I mean, unless the animal is in absolute danger, like you think a predator is going to get it. It's best to just leave it where it is and call an animal rescue league and let them come and get the animal. If the animal is in danger, we always say to just put it in a box with some towels or something soft, and then call the animal rescue league. A lot of times what they'll do is they will contact a animal rehabilitator. If the animal is in bad shape, sometimes it'll go up to Tufts Veterinary Hospital in Grafton and to be looked after and taken care of. If it's not a really serious injury, it'll stay with the rehabilitator. And once they're fully rehabilitated, then they start looking for places to take them to take care of them for the rest of their lives. And that's where we come in.
So we have another question about their nesting period. So if they're nesting now in February, how long is that nesting period and when are their eggs hatching?
Okay, so they lay their eggs anywhere from like right now to the end of February. Be another month before they hatch, and then it'll be another month before they're actually able to come out of the nest. So it's a good 2 months that mom's got to really hang out there with the nest. And then with the great horned owls, it actually takes all summer long for them to learn the skills that they need to be able to hunt on their own. So they hang with the parents all summer long. So if you actually find a nest and a mated pair, and it's really fun to watch their chicks grow up and learn how to hunt. And then there's a lot of, when we do our owl prowls here, when we take people out to go for a walk at night and listen for owls, we always do it either in the fall. And that's because that's when the juvenile owls, the young owls, are dispersing. Mom and dad said, okay, it's time to go, you're on your own. And they're looking for a territory. So there's a lot of hooting going on, like in early September into October, of young owls trying to find a territory, and the older owls saying, this is my territory. Then when you get into the springtime or the early winter and or late winter and springtime, that's when the hooting is associated with the mating calls. These are animals that are breeding at that point. So it's like, now until maybe about April that you'll hear the different species of owls hooting because of its breeding season. And then in the fall, it's all the dispersing. The rest of the year you can hear them too. They're just not quite as vocal. Whoa, where are you going there? Where are you going, girl? All right, okay. Okay, 1, 2, 3, yeah. There you go. All in a day. All in a day, silly. She is strong. Does anybody want to guess how much she weighs? Maybe.
Go ahead and type your guesses into the chat if anybody has some, because that was a common question. So we have 3 pounds, 12 pounds, 23, 15, 50, 12, 4, 10.
So I love to ask this question because when I'm holding her at the end of my arm, and I always have to brace my arm. I have my hand under my elbow, and she's big. She's really big. I mean, she's about the size of a cat, maybe even a little bigger. Small dog sometimes. She's huge. And so I like to ask that question because I usually do get like 15, 20, 30 pounds. She actually weighs 4 pounds. So we had some people that were correct there. The little owl that you saw, she only weighs 6 ounces. And the reason she's so light, relatively light, you would think she'd be a lot bigger, is because if you took all her feathers and put her on them on a scale, they'd weigh next to nothing. And then they have hollow bones. Birds have hollow bones so that they can fly. They need to be light, and not hollow like a straw, but more like hollow like a sponge, like lots of little holes, so that their bones are still strong, but they're a lot lighter than our big solid bones. And that they need that to be able to get the lift to be light. So they look like they would weigh a lot more than they do, but a lot of her weight is in her talons and in her head, in her beaks. And then she's got strong flight muscles too. But they don't do the soaring. So their flight muscles aren't quite as developed as like the hawks and the ospreys that do a lot of soaring. These guys kind of just glide from tree to tree to tree. A lot of her weight is in her talons. So yes, any other questions?
So one of ours are, do owls hunt bats?
That's a really good question. That's a really good question. And I'll be the first to say, I actually don't know that one, because I don't think it's a favorite food species of theirs. So I've never heard anyone talking about them eating bats. And bats are actually really, really agile and fast. So I can't see an owl being able to maneuver, to be able to get at what a bat going that speed. So just, my brain is saying no, that they wouldn't, but I'm actually gonna research that as soon as I get off. I love questions that people ask me that I haven't thought about before, but just kind of thinking it through, I would guess that no, that they wouldn't be eating bats just because of the way the bats fly.
Yeah, that makes total sense. That'd be really hard to catch.
Yep.
So you said earlier that screech owls live in hollows to stay out of the rain because they can't fly if their feathers are too wet. So if a great horned owl is then too big to be in a hollow, do they just not fly during the rain?
Yes. Yeah, they have to kind of lay low. So what we always refer to it is they're hunkering down, just kind of like we do when there's a bad storm. But they sometimes if there's a big enough cavity or a cave or something like that that an owl can get into, they'll do that. But when there is storms, we always say the owls will be hunkering down. We will not be able to hear them, and they won't be hooting right now. You never hear owls hooting when it's raining because they're just really, really hunkered down. The problem is that if we have sustained rain that keeps going and going and going and going, an owl can actually starve to death because they don't hunt during the rain. So, I'm always thinking about that when we have a really long stretch where there's a lot of rain, but there's a lot that they have to contend with when they're out in nature.
Yeah. How long can they go between meals?
So they usually eat once a day. Oh, I wanted to show you this. So she's fed once a day, and that's typically when they eat. They'll eat once a day, but they have to digest their food and spit up a pellet of undigested bone and fur before they can eat again. It's almost like a blockage. I've got an owl pellet here. It's kind of all busted apart, but I'm going to take out the skull because I found this pellet. They're usually circular. This one's kind of all dried out and fell apart. But I found this in the forest and it had a whole skull in it. So I wanted to show you. Where are you going today? I know you're feisty. You're feisty. You're like saying, what's going on? There's a whole skull in the pellet, and then you can see some of the undigested, fur there. But they have to spit up that pellet. So that's usually about 6 hours after they've eaten. They'll spit up the pellet, and then they can eat again. So they're usually hunting one a day. So if there's a really rainy period where it's like raining all week long, that tends to be when you start to see owls during the day, because they're just taking any opportunity to hunt at that point. If we have a really long stretch of rain, they have to be able to hunt. And so you might see one hunting during the day then. Yes, I know.
That is so amazing, that complete skull. That is very, very cool. So one of our next questions is, do all birds of prey select a new mate each year, or do some of them mate for life?
It depends on if they're migratory or not. So the birds of prey that tend to migrate, they tend to get a new mate every year. But these guys, like the owls that are non-migratory, they will tend to mate for life, but a lot of times something will happen to their mate, and if that happens, then they'll select another mate. But it really has to do with the migration. If they migrate, they don't, and if they're staying around all year long, they tend to, yes. Great question.
So just a sort of one last question to wrap everything up. Do you have any recommendations of where our visitors might be able to see some of these amazing friends that we've met today?
So this would be, if I were just, for one thing, listen, get up really early in the morning, where you live, open up your front door and listen. Or before you go to bed at night, especially this time of year, open up your front door and listen. You might just hear them in your neighborhoods. But good places to spot them, and you got to be, you know, because we're usually hiking during the day. Take some binoculars and look up into like pine trees. They like to kind of hang out in pine trees because it gives them some coverage, especially during the winter time. The other thing to do is look at some of your local nature centers and go out on an owl prowl. You know, you can go out and listen for them in we have so many sanctuaries in Massachusetts, and there's a lot of owl prowls that are going this time of year. So maybe you could go on one of those and listen for owls and go with a guide. But they're all around you, and it just takes patience and a lot of listening. When you're hiking in nature, you really need to slow down because you're surrounded by wildlife, but they're really good at hiding. And they're hiding because they're trying to protect themselves. So you've got to really slow yourself down and really look around to be able to find these animals. Oh, and I didn't want to go before I told you about this, the snowy owls. So this is a snowy owl wing. I'm going to show you. These are bigger than the great horned owls. This is a snowy owl wing. Ooh, if I can get it right here. These are our visitors, our winter visitors. They usually show up in November. They're coming from the Arctic, and that's where they are all summer long. And then the winter time, a lot of the juveniles they're really finding out that a lot of them anyway, older owls too, come down and spend the winter down here. And they arrive in November, leave in April, but they kind of are coastal birds. So they hang to the coast. So that's where we see a lot of them in Massachusetts. But one of the really neat things is that, and the reason why we have an active study going on here, it's called the Snowy Owl Project, and it's part of a larger study called Project Snowstorm. And you can go online and you can read all about these, is because Norman Smith, who used to be the director here, he's now our raptor specialist. He is the one who rescues all the snowy owls off of Logan Airport, because they come down and they're attracted to the airport. He's already rescued 20 from the airport this season. And they feel that the reason they're attracted to the airport is because it's flat, like the tundra. And there's a lot of rats out there, and they eat lemmings up in the Arctic. So there's plenty of food source for them. But big birds and big planes don't go together. So Norman has Homeland Security clearance to go out on the tarmac and rescue these owls. And then he'll take them, he'll do blood work on them, he'll band them, that's to ID them in case he catches them again. And then the really super healthy ones, he might put a radio telemetry pack on them. And that's part of this whole network called Project Snowstorm, where they're studying the migratory patterns of snowy owls and seeing the impact of climate change on their behaviors. And so that's like really, really cool. And then when he's done with that, then he takes the animals up to Plum Island and to Salisbury Beach and releases them. Plum Island is a really, really good place to go see snowy owls this time of year, like right now. And you can go up to the park there, just ask the ranger. There's a whole bunch of parking lots on Plum Island, and that's the North Shore. And the ranger is always communicating with the people that are going in and out. And you just have to ask him, have they spotted any snowies today? And he said, oh yeah, they saw them on parking lot number 4. Just go down there, park there, and go out onto the beach. They hang out on the dunes, and they hang out in the marsh areas. They're very easy to see because they're white, except that when it's snowing, it's a little bit trickier. But they tend to really stick out in those, the marsh areas and on the sand dunes. And then they hunt along the shore. They hunt a lot of seagulls and things. So it's really, really cool and easy to see a snowy owl up at Plum Island. Any other questions?
I think that's it for now. Kathleen, that was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you, wonderful birds, for joining us as well.
Yeah.
And you know, letting us
So
learn
folks,
and
if you
together.
want to you know, learn more about the Snowy Owls, Project Snowstorm, and the Snowy Owl Project, and then they can the Peregrine Falcons in Boston. So okay, so thank you so much for inviting me. This was really fun.
Thanks again to Kathleen for lending her presentation from last year. And thank you all for being here. We hope you enjoyed Birds of Prey. I'd now like to pass the mic to Rebecca Smerling with Boston Harbor Now.
Thank you, Alex. On behalf of Boston Harbor Islands National and State Park, our presenters, and Boston Harbor Now's partners, the National Park Service, and the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation, thank you so much for attending Winter Wild. Whether you stayed for one presentation or stayed all day, your participation and support means the world to us. This program is a part of our special anniversary series. We hope to see you at another one of our special anniversary programs, celebrating the 25 years of Boston Harbor Islands National Park and 50 years of the Boston Harbor Islands State Park. Please keep an eye out on our calendar and Eventbrite pages for upcoming programs. We hope you can join us at the Winter Wander, the first in-person event on Pettix Island since February 2020. Links are in the chat. Thanks again for joining us, and you'll be able to find the recordings from today's presentations at bostonharborislands.org in coming weeks. Have a wonderful weekend, stay warm and safe, and bundle up.